record it and then I can send you like a link.
Yeah, no, that's all right. We save it and we can share it with all our buddies.
Yep. Cool.
All right.
All right, we're on.
We're on. Hi, everyone. How you going?
Hi, Sean. I can see your camera there.
Sean, you're on, which is great.
Can you hear us okay, Sean? Give us a thumbs up.
No? Jamie, can you hear us? Okay, great.
Cool.
Hello, everyone else. Do you want to put your cameras on so we can see your smiley faces this morning? Hi, Farley. How are you?
She's just connecting her sound.
Oh, okay. There you go. Connecting.
There we go. Hi, Farley.
Hi, you can take yourself off mute. There's only about 12 of us on today, so that's
how are you going?
Good. How are you guys?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thanks for coming on board. We've got about 12 people said they'll come in today. I don't know if they were coming into the office or on screen, but I'm lonely, but that's okay. I'm okay about being lonely. I think we're ready to go. Okay. I think I'm all set. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it.
No worries.
And Matt Pinniger did come in and he said, can you tell everybody that he just won the footy tips for this week? And I don't know if that is like a thing that goes around an announcement, but I just made a public announcement that Matt won the footy tips. He was walking around with an envelope, so it must be true. He's just not making it up. Thanks, guys, for coming in. I appreciate it. And people will join as they come. And I'm also recording. So if you miss out on anything or need to take off, I get how busy everybody is. We'll make it available through, I don't know, I'll talk to Belinda and Lee Bake. I'll talk to Lee around where he'd like this saved, but we'll put it somewhere where you can access it easily and look back to later. Not that I particularly want people to look back at me, but there'll be some content on here and I'm happy to share all the slide work that I've done as well. And I'm also happy to have a yarn if you need one. Good morning. My name's Shona Reid. I'm the CEO at Reconciliation SA, and I really appreciate you guys coming on board. We had what we call a local government reconciliation industry network meeting with some CEOs and mayors a little while ago, and they said, we'd love you to do some RAP workshops, one for those that are just starting and one for those that have been around for a bit. In accompanying that, I had a queue of about 15 councils calling me, asking me for some help. And unfortunately, I lost my project officer for RAPs. So me being able to respond to that many was slightly an impossible task, but hence the opportunity. And I think we contacted everybody mostly who'd made an inquiry and asked them to pop online because we can have a chat now and to kill two birds with one stone. So thanks for joining and I really appreciate it. There should be about 12 of us on either in the room or online today, which is great. But before we get too much further, I just want to acknowledge that, oh, crikey, Moses. Sorry, there we go. I just want to acknowledge that today I am on Kaurna land today, and I'd like to pay my respects. As an Eastern Arana woman, I come from the Northern Territory, and my family have always been in Northern Territory. I'd like to pay my respects as a guest to Kaurna country. I live, grow, and work and look after my children on this country, and I feel very blessed to do so. If you know the country that you're on, please feel free to put it in the chat bar and acknowledge, and or say it to yourself around where you are. It's really cool to find out some of the. I often do this stuff with kids, not in classrooms around tracking where they were born or where their parents were, and we kind of do this bit of a travel exercise and find out what country they've all lived on before, and it's a little bit of a fun thing to do. But I found that when I do rap sessions, the adults love doing it too, thinking about all their travels and where they've travelled to and some of the stories that they share. So, so in doing that, I'd like to also acknowledge all the land that you sit on today. We've got some people from our regional areas, which is amazing. And thank you for coming online. I really appreciate it. And I will get out there soon. And put your hand up if you want to visit, because we're about to get on the road. I've just been gifted a car by Department for Treasury, which, my gosh, you know, let's fall over. So I'm going to get on the road soon, and I'm going to go and drive up. And I think my first trip is going to be up on the Eyre Peninsula. So, so I'm on my way. I've just got to get the keys. So, you know, I won't get too excited yet, you know. So today is around RAPs, it's around Reconciliation Action Plans, and it's around really the beginnings and the starting of your thinking around Reconciliation Action Plans. And look, if we finish before 1, which I'm pretty sure we will because I talk fast, I'm also happy to enter into some dialogue and some longer dialogue with you all. But let's just get our head around a couple of things before we dive into the RAP stuff, because I think it's really important just to put you in the place of reconciliation before we go there. And I won't hang around on this too much, but I really wanted to kind of, you know, have a conversation around reconciliation. And for me, reconciliation is about relationships. It's always been about relationships and good quality relationships, and relationships that are built on trust. And, you know, there's an opportunity, you know, our whole society operates on how well we have a relationship with each other. And, you know, we see through different moments in time, relationships go up and down depending on how, you know, how we wish to interact with each other, and, you know, the benefits and values of that. And I think the reconciliation process really enables us to evaluate our relationship between our First Nations peoples, the First Peoples of Australia, and the wider community. So really reconciliation for me, and look, there's a lot of discussion, and I'm sure you hear it on a local level around the word reconciliation. Even I don't particularly like the word reconciliation, but it's beyond that. For me, it's what sits underneath of that, and what underneath reconciliation is the relationships and how we build and progress those. Feel free at any time to jump in the chat box, you know, any thoughts that come to your mind. But I did pop up a question because I thought there were going to be people in the room. What do you think reconciliation is about? I'm happy for you to just chat away in the chat box and everyone will see, and I'm happy for you to put your hand up and have a yarn or anything like that. That's not a problem. When we, I'll go to the next one. Wrong computer. Just in terms of kicking off, Rec SA, we're a really small not-for-profit, tiny. We started, I came in 2019 and I think I had 2.8 staff. Now we have minus some, so I'm sitting at about 6 staff at the moment. So we're still quite a small organisation, but we have increased significantly. But our whole job is basically to move people from point A to point B, in terms of those that probably aren't familiar with the reconciliation space or haven't engaged in that space before, and move people from that space to a space where they are a bit more well-informed around reconciliation, and they can play an active role in, you know, building relationships across SA. So we want to mobilise people. We want to mobilise them around developing respectful relationships, around First Nations matters of interest. And we also want to build opportunities to share and connect with each other, which is so important in our business, is being able to value and find the value in each other's cultures and beliefs, and that's what makes our society a little bit richer. So we want to build respectful relations. We want to create and thrive in partnerships with each other. That's not just between First Nations and the wider South Australian community, but that's between the business sector and the social services sector. Like, look, it relates to a broad section of our community. We want to fight racism. Fundamentally, racism is a word and a concept that's not been discussed well in Australia. It's a hard conversation for some people to have. There is levels of fragility that sits around the word racism. I'm okay with it. I'm okay about talking about it. In fact, I talk about it all day, every day. And what it does do, though, is it provides we fight racism through conversations, through understanding it, through understanding what motivates it, and also provide an opportunity to people move from probably some preconceived ideas and stereotypes and break some of that down and create unlearnings and relearnings around, you know, race-based conversations or race-based stereotypes in Australia. We also play a role around advocacy and from a rights-based conversation. So we are really keen to focus in on a rights-based approach, not a one that's, I suppose, a conversation that, you know, wouldn't it be lovely if everybody had an opportunity to participate in this? No, it's a right for everyone to participate equally in our society. So we are very much coming from that right space. Reconciliation Australia and Reconciliation SA. I just want to do a little cover note that Reconciliation Australia hold the trademarks for reconciliation action plans. We don't hold the trademarks for that. We are not a subsidiary of Reconciliation Australia. We are a separate entity. They were created in 2001. We were created in 2012. We both have our own governance. Reconciliation Australia was born out of, I don't know if you remember the Bob Hawke Barunga Agreement, and there was a promise of a treaty up in the Arnhem Land. And on his, during his term, he was unable to deliver on that agreement. And born out of that process was a Reconciliation Council, Reconciliation Australia Council. And there was a promise that that 10 years we'd all be reconciled. And after the 10 years it wasn't, but then the federal government decided to fund and legislate Reconciliation Australia. They are an independent, they're not for profit, just like us. And they are based in Canberra and Sydney. We're really good friends with them. They're really excited that I was doing this workshop today to talk about reconciliation action plans. We don't receive any benefit from reconciliation action plans other than the fact that we're creating and, you know, obviously creating a movement in this space and providing a really what I believe to be a solid framework for organisations in, you know, trying to tackle the conversations around reconciliation, but also providing the support that's needed to keep the momentum, because I think we can all attest to, you know, we start off something that's a grand idea and things fall off the table quite regularly. So this is something that I truly believe works, and I've seen the successes, and I'll share a bit of those in a minute with you. So when we talk about reconciliation just in general, there's a number of things, dimensions, there's a number of things that I mean when I say about reconciliation. So you'll see on the screen there, there's 5 dimensions of reconciliation. And it's really, you know, race relations, there's equity and equality, unity, institutional integrity, and historical acceptance. And I'll go through some of those in a second. But it's integral, you know, you can't, one of the things I think around reconciliation is that we can't pick and choose which one we want to do. They all are one. They're all part of the family around reconciliation. And when we talk about committing to a process of reconciliation, all of these need to be looked at, investigated, and all of them are really important if we're going to make headways into creating a fair and reconciled community in South Australia, whether it be in a sporting club, whether it be in your council, whether it be in a big corporate entity, it doesn't change. The context change, but what we're trying to achieve in all of those areas remains the same. And I wanted to, you know, I'll go back to that slide in a minute, and plus I'll send it to you. I'm going to go through each of those domains in a second. But I just wanted to let you know that support for reconciliation has grown. It has grown significantly over the last 3 decades since, you know, the agreement to go in, you know, to undertake a 10-year reconciliation process. There is a far greater awareness around the complexities and the magnitude of First Nations cultures and knowledges, and now more than ever, Australians are learning and understanding around, it might be whether it's the impact of settlement in Australia, whether it be modern Australia cultural beliefs, whether it be celebrating culture, whether it will be awareness around the disparity that sits in our community, and some of the complexities. But there's much more awareness in Australia around that, which is really, 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 oh, crikey, what have I done? Sorry, I was trying to do, I've got notes here. And last year, Rec Australia did a barometer, and I just sort of show these 2 stats to you around the how, you know, in terms when I talk about reconciliation being a relationship, 95% of First Nations people across Australia that were interviewed believe that a relationship between the wider community and First Nations people was really important. And equally, 91% of our wider community to also believe. So there is a desire and a will to have a really positive relationship between the First Peoples and our, obviously our culture, our community and the makeup of our community now. And that includes new arrivals to Australia, that includes those that immigrated in the early days, that includes those that came over on the First Fleet and they're obviously their subsequent generations that have lived here. So that's a really good indication that there's a buy-in to reconciliation, and there's an opportunity that we don't want to lose when there's such a significant proportion of our population that really want to build a relationship. I think at the same time, there's also some value that has been placed in the space where there is 70% of people in our community, in the wider community, feel that our culture, our society is better off with many cultural groups. And First Nation cultural groups across Australia, there's over 300 First nations in Australia. And not only that, I think we're also referring to the value of cultures from overseas coming to Australia. This is included in that. So over 70% or 70% have said that that's really, really important and they value that. I also wanted to share some stats with you around some not so good stuff that came out of that research. And I'll just caveat with this was also research that did not on purpose. It was scheduled 2 years in advance that this research would be undertaken in May and June of 2020, which is exactly the same time, if you remember correctly, we've just had the anniversary of the Black Lives Matter matters over in America, and obviously its impact over here in Australia, and conversations really opened up around deaths in custody. So I just want to caveat that that also happened at the same time as this research, and there is a bit of some commentary of that in Reconciliation Australia's reporting. So there has been a significant spike in all these areas when it comes to racism. And I think this is really important to understand that it doesn't necessarily mean, I think, yes, it is a part of it, but the one part of this is that people, because of those conversations in May, June last year, people are more racially literate than they have ever been before around understanding what racism is, seeing it happen, awareness levels are higher, reporting mechanisms are better. And yes, with COVID and with, with COVID and with Black Lives Matter, there has been a greater, I suppose, reporting of racism in our community. So you can see from the stats there that, there's been sometimes 10% jumps in the statistics around whether people believe Australia is a racist country. But also, I think, most concerningly is the interpersonal stuff. So there's 52%. So that's an 11% increase in 2 years of people saying that they've experienced at least one form of racial prejudice in the last 6 months. So that's, for me, that was the biggest stat that worried me the most. So over half of our First Nations populations are saying that they've experienced racial prejudice. And that's in a variety of ways. When we talk about racial literacy, we're talking about understanding, obviously passive forms of racism or not overly overt. So it might be systemic racism that they've noticed in trying to access services, systems aren't set up. It might be simply going to the grocery store and being screamed at, or no one's sitting next to you on the bus when it's the only seat that's left. So, there's much more awareness around the forms of racism now. So that's a really important. And that's been something we've been working on as a collective. So all the reconciliation councils in each of the states and Reconciliation Australia is how do we better inform people about racism? And I think that's showing up in some of these statistics, is that both First Nations communities and the wider community are gaining some education in that space. When we talk about people experiencing racism systemically, you can see in the green ones that we've got there, there's some significant spikes, especially in the police space. You can see that they've, people have identified their interactions with police. They've experienced racial discrimination. Local shop owners is a big one. The rental market. I sit on the Housing Trust Board for South Australia, and that's one of our big focuses is First Nations people's inability to access the private rental market. It's hard enough to do that now. We all know that. We know the stories around the difficulties in getting private rental at the moment, but try and do that with dark skin. And the reporting of people sending fair-skinned family members or such as myself, I've done it a number of times, or non-Aboriginal family or friends to do interviews for private rentals. And these are professionals that earn more than me are having to do that. So, it is very clear that there is a significant, and you've noticed again, it's a big spike, it's a doubling of people who are saying that they've experienced that in the housing sector. Again, doctors, nurses and medical staff is still being seen in the health sector. And, I've had conversations with Women's and Children's and the health networks, and they're acutely aware of the racism that sits within their institutions and are engaging in conversations with us around how can they better address that as a system to support their staff, but also people feel they can access medical services, because it is a fatal decision whether someone doesn't go because they fear they're going to experience racism. It has a huge impact on their well-being, and in some instances we can link that back to people avoiding medical services and their health declines quite rapidly. I'll leave that there. I'll leave that for you to look at. And you'll have these stats anyway. But my point in demonstrating that is that there has been a big spike, and we're talking about relationships, and we're talking, from this layer and from this position, relationship, there's a long way for us still to go. And there is a big opportunity in the development of reconciliation action plans to challenge some of this and bring some of those statistics back into play, but also understand what they mean for you, and understand whether this is something, your council and your staff and your community services need to know, is there areas that we can shine lights on within a reconciliation action plan that can help, build relationships in a positive way. So I promised that I would go through what each of those dimensions are, and I did this PowerPoint at like 11:30 last night, so that's not the sexiest of PowerPoints, so I'm sorry. I tried my hardest, nothing like a white screen. Race relations. So really race relations, if I'm going to nut it down into a couple of words, which is in those sections you can't see because that little circle is obviously way too small. All Australians understand and value First Nations and the wider community cultures, their rights and experiences, which result in stronger relationships based on trust and respect, and ones that are free of racism. One of the goals of this domain is to have positive two-way relationships that are built on trust and respect. And this happens throughout our society. And one of the key focus areas around race relations is obviously to overcome racism, which is why I showed you that slide just before. Another domain that I think is really, really important. I mean, all the domains are important, but this one speaks the volumes. This one is around equality and equity. And what we mean by that is that First Nations people participate equally in a range of life opportunities, and that there are unique rights of First Nations peoples, and these need to be upheld. So the First Peoples of this country do have unique rights. There are a number of land-based rights, there's story rights, there's, cultural, spiritual rights that exist for First Nations people in this country that simply just don't exist for people who've come here. And that's a really important part of understanding where this equality and equity domain comes from. And the biggest, if we think about the goal of this, was that really what we want is everyone to participate equally and equitably in all life areas. And that includes everything from, walking to a shop and being able to purchase exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, and the value of the dollar that you exchange is seen as just as important as everybody else. Or you know, you've got the same right to go for a home loan, or, you know, you've got the same right to get a rental property as everybody else. You don't have to, you know, be masked or unmasked. That this is what equality and equity is all about. And this is where, if you look at those statistics, most of the spikes in reporting of racism exist systemically. So the system has always been based on the best interests of the majority, and hasn't recognised your unique rights for First Nations peoples. And it's a settler-based system, and it hasn't worked for First Nations peoples, and that is why we have significant disparity across all areas. So there's overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. There is, you know, they're 4 times more likely for babies, Aboriginal babies, to die than non-Aboriginal babies to die at birth. My husband is now 52. Statistically, he has only got 4 years left. So he's due to die, statistically, at 56. And I can already see the deterioration of his kidneys. So we can already see that even though he's been living a healthy life for the last, you know, since I come along, let's just call it, there is, you know, there is legacy issues. You know, there is kidney failure in his family. His mother passed away last year, and she was the oldest of 18 children. You know, kidney issues are rife in his family, and now he, you know, it's coming out through him, and he's having kidney troubles. And so we're already looking at, you know, our youngest son. We've got 7 children. Our youngest son is 6. And, we're looking at each other going, you know, are you going to see Job, you know, grow up to be a father himself? Are you going to be around for his grandchildren? And the likelihood with his, you know, some of the health issues that he's now having to face is no, he won't. But that's not something that happens as regularly, or it's not a foregone conclusion, which kind of we're taking on that it is, for the wider community, that life expectancy is 20 years more than it is for an Aboriginal person. So there's some of the goals we're wanting to do, is that with equity and equality, and that as a reconciliation action, that we're able to address some of those closing the gaps. And we really want to focus on strengthening people's focus on closing the gap. There are new ways of thinking around closing the gap that is happening, and there are processes and programs and different approaches that are being developed all the time that are helping Aboriginal engagement or First Nation engagement in you know, key areas where we can break down some of the systemic exclusion, you know, in terms of health and education. I think if we think about closing the gap, the only goal that was actually achieved in the last round of closing the gap was the Year 12 attainment goal. And that was none of the other key indicators of equality and equity were actually achieved through the closing the gap agreements. And that's why new partnership agreements were undertaken. So I'm not sure if you understand that closing the gap system or the national partnership agreements, but state government just signed off in June last year, or 1st of July last year, new partnership agreements with the federal government around improving life outcomes for First Nations people. And one of the key focuses in that area, which is the second part of that key action, is around increasing First Nations people's participation in self-determination, and also in the design and delivery of programs that are for them. So for us, in terms of developing a reconciliation action plan and how we go about reconciliation action plan, they're really good guides around, are we including First Nations voice in our development? When we've got you know, most councils have social services attached to them in some aspects, whether it's from a vaccinations process or whether it's a youth program areas, you know, they're all included in the closing the gap targets. And, you know, are we focusing in on that, and do we have a role to play? And obviously I believe yes, we do. And what is that role? What is our contribution, and how we can help out with that? Feel free to put your hand up at any time. I'll figure out which keyboard I'm supposed to touch if you need me to jump in. Historical acceptance. Now, this is a really exciting one for me, but there is a, what we mean by historical acceptance, let me just get that one out of the way, is that all Australians, I suppose this domain is intended to help Australians understand and accept what's happened in the past. And this primarily occurs to settlement and its impact today on First Nations people. There seems to be a disjunct between what happened a few hundred years ago and how that's impacted Aboriginal communities today. And the aim of this historical acceptance domain is to to have some acceptance amongst our community, the wider community, that there were some wrongs done. There were some, I'm doing a project at the moment around understanding massacre sites from settlement through to federation. And it's really exciting because we're finding out all this information. And we found out some really, really hard stuff to hear, but we've also found some really amazing stories around, in our regional areas, families hiding people or helping people to, survive and trying to thrive in an era that didn't necessarily help facilitate that very much. So one of the historical acceptance and the benefits of getting into historical acceptance is that we can now, if we understand the situation or how things came to be, we're able to understand why people are in situations that they are now. So let me give you for example, a couple of things. So if we understand that Aboriginal people, First Nations people, and there's some stories around that I'm reading in our massacre research, were made to work on farms for no payment. And they didn't pay, they just got board and lodgings and a few rations. So there was no opportunity for wealth creation back then. So opportunities then to participate, socially with people, there was exclusions in that space. So no wealth creations, there was no money paid, weren't able to pay or collect or save money to buy a house, to have financial security, to pay for certain luxuries or necessities in life. That has impacted generationally in terms of, my mother's side, the German side, we've always had an inheritance when someone dies, that we're able to, look at, I'm going to inherit, a few $100,000, that'll help with my home loan so I can pay that off. And then, all of a sudden I've paid off my house and I can give that to my children. So those sorts of, assumptions or things that are a rite of passage in the wider community just aren't there in First Nations community on a large scale. But things are slowly changing. So I'll have that for my kids, which is wonderful. And hopefully that happens for them. So once we get to this historical acceptance, and there's a truth-telling process, and there's education, and there's unlearning and relearning, we can start moving forward around where we want to go and how we're able to change the trajectory of people's life outcomes. I'll give you an example around the trajectory conversations. As I said before, I sit on the Housing Trust board. Over time, and this is obviously in the 1900s, South Australia has dictated where the social housing properties are going to sit. So mostly Aboriginal housing properties have been sitting on the fringes of Adelaide. So Adelaide historically was quite small and attached itself to the centre of Adelaide. Housing trust properties were placed out on the fringes and limited schooling opportunities were provided. So schools eventually started popping up, but they were not the highest quality education opportunities. Then we talk about there was no public transport in those fringe communities, and so people couldn't catch buses. So we had limited education, limited access to transport, the shopping, limited access to food security in those fringed areas. So systemically, there has been a bias in our society, and understanding and learning about that helps us put the context around why it's really important to learn about this and where we want to start changing that trajectory in our future endeavours. And the last one, I think, no, maybe not, unity. And this one's really about this domain particularly is around coming together and having a shared national identity. And being able to, I suppose, celebrate and promote and enhance our public education around First Nations histories and cultures, because there's not just some sad stuff, but there's also some pretty awesome stuff that sit in that space as well, that really adds value to us as a society. And we really want to start getting into that. And how can we come together to do that? And you'll see in the Reconciliation Action Plans, there's so many opportunities for unity, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and coming together and you know, to be honest, you know, when we're talking about relationship building, it's much easier to build relationships based on the really exciting stuff and the fun stuff than it is to get down and dirty and the really tricky stuff that's going on. So, you know, unity is a really important one, and it gives you an opportunity to open up doorways and build relationships and build trust so you can have some of those harder conversations. The last one I want to get into is institutional integrity. And I left this one to the last because this one is really about the reconciliation movement supporting, you know, so the reconciliation movement supporting the national politics and business and local politics and community structures and business structures. So it's really about looking at all of those systems and how can they support all these domains of reconciliation. And as I said, I'm very much focused on the rights-based space, and you can see the UN Declaration. It's really important that we're able to do that and protect rights. But things like reconciliation action plans build institutional integrity. If we think about, you think about your organisation, we have finance plans, we've got auditors, we've got business plans, we've got reconciliation action plans do the same thing. You've got finance plans or, you know, that build financial integrity within organisations. You've got business plans that build business integrity within your organisation, or, you know, service integrity within your organisation. Reconciliation action plans build cultural integrity within your organisation. And that's a really fundamental component, and it complements the other work that you do. It doesn't override it. It complements your business planning, your financial planning. It is a complementary document that's meant to support and uphold that. And I really, you know, value the opportunity to, when I talk with, you know, work with people and businesses and organisations and councils as well, to see how they're all interwoven and how that, how they all can play their part in making your job easier, but also providing a really robust structure for your organisation and catering for all of that. I'm tired. Does anyone want to ask a question around reconciliation? Because I haven't even got talking about RAPs yet. I've just given you, like, I've just placed you in this space. Are you suitably placed? Awesome. You're suitably placed. No questions? All right, cool. We're going to go, let's go to RAPs. Let's talk about RAPs. I am very lonely. I could have done this from my office. I didn't need to come to the LGA, but much better than my office. I don't know if you've had a chance or whether you've done RAPs before. I've got a whole bunch I brought with me. If you ever want some ideas around RAPs, Reconciliation Australia have all the RAPs in the world. Here's a council RAP, Adelaide City Council, sitting on their website. If you're wanting kind of like an inside knowledge of who's got the bestest rap ever, give me a private message. I can't publicly call them out, I'll get in trouble. But there are a lot of examples of raps out there, and there's no, you know, there's no one answer to all of this. Rap development is very personal. Just like your business plans, just like your financial plans, it's a very intimate journey that you need to go on. And I mean intimate because it's sometimes there's some confronting things. Sometimes there's some realizations like, oh man, we dropped the ball in this space. Or sometimes there's little excitement moments like, oh God, we did that and we didn't even know we were doing that. But it will be different for every council area. And you know, you can't just pick up a rap and go, oh, we'll do exactly the same as this council's done and we'll be right. It won't work like that. And it's one of those, the only successful journey is a hard slog journey in RAPs, but I'm hoping I can make it a little bit easier for you, give you some shortcuts and at least get you started in the right space. Because really RAPs are just a framework, just like your business plan, strategic planning, financial planning. It is a framework that's given to you, and it's been tried and it's been tested. It's been critiqued by First Nations communities, First Nations experts. It's been critiqued by corporates, CEOs. It's been critiqued by councils, and it's constantly being evaluated and reviewed. And it's also just a framework. So it's something that can be, you can move within this framework. There's a lot of guiding things in there, in the RAPs, but it needs to be flexible, and it is flexible for the unique needs of each council. The RAPs provide you, and especially if you're just starting off, provide you with kind of like a step up, a whole bunch of practical actions that are recommended for you to drive councils or your organisation's contribution to reconciliation. And can I just, if I was to wrap up and someone says, Shona, just cut out all the, fancy talk, what are RAPs? For me, it's a mirror. You hold it up and it looks at the internal workings of your organisation. It's not a PR effort. I mean, it turns into that after a while, like as in a great way to engage community and to let them know that you're trying hard, and to let community, your wider community and your Aboriginal community, that you've got to focus on this and you really value relationship building. But essentially, it asks you to look at the internal workings of your organisations, to check out your diet, basically. It's asking you, is your organisation healthy on the inside when it comes to each of those dimensions of reconciliation? And that's obviously my last point, is that it aims to advance those dimensions, and it enables you to do that in a way that's at your pace. This is not a race. I know there's lots of different layers, and some are beginners and some are experts in this space. I don't know if anyone really is an expert, but some people claim to be. I'm not an expert in this space. I'm doing an Innovate RAP. You'd think I'd be doing the Elevate RAP, but no, I'm doing an Innovate RAP because it's really important that, we have a healthy diet. Our organisation has a healthy diet. So that's what if I was to do that, I thought I said a couple of words, but that just took me 2 minutes to say. But mirrors and diets is what it's all about. But it's about looking inwards, and it's not necessarily looking outwards all the time. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. I had a video. Oh, I've got a video. Quick, watch. Can you hear anything? Oh, no. Now, yeah, I don't know. I'm touching things.
Shona, try the sound button down the bottom of your screen. I don't know if that makes a difference, but
yeah, sound button at the bottom of my screen.
On the left-hand side, like where the play button is.
Oh.
Try that.
Oh, where is it? YouTube. I think it's okay. No, it looks okay. There's something wrong. Do you know what? It was really cool because it was going to get me to do have a breather, and I've stopped talking. I'll send you the link, yeah? I don't want to waste your time or my time on this one. I can't, it's not going to show it. This was a really fancy rap video done by Reconciliation Australia around RAPs and what they can do and what they've done. I'll send you the link. It's not a problem. You can have a look at that in your own time. Bugger, I'm really crappy about that. Anyway, maybe if I've got time in a second, I'll send that to you. Now, someone sent me a message. Oh, Farley, you've held your first RAP working group meeting and it was awesome. In the park.
We did. We ran and we met on Park, so with our elected members and our working group, Garnet Elders. And we spoke really honestly. We've got a great relationship. But some of the feedback was, the native food gardens and the artwork and everything, very nice to have. but how do we go further? How do we really make a difference in regards to economic benefits and employment and that kind of thing? So any advice that you have, because I'd really like to, I guess, stretch us. I know we're not at that point yet with the RAP, but I'd really like to stretch us to look at what we can actually do to really challenge some of our outcomes.
What where are you, Farley?
Oh, we're at Burnside.
You're at Burnside, yes. And the RAP, but when we get into it in a second, the RAP stuff, I love your thinking, just jump ahead, go on. Absolutely. In the RAP place, you know, I'll get to it towards the end of the slideshows. There's an opportunity section, and it really talks about economic drivers, procurement drivers. It talks about business development. You know, some of those closing gap targets around economic growth for First Nations people sit in that section, and it does push people into different areas, which is super exciting because, you know, this year's theme from National Reconciliation Week is more than a word, reconciliation takes action. And I think that theme has really been pushed by Aboriginal community members around, they love seeing the RAPs come out. They love seeing conversations happen around this, but sometimes, in some instances, that's where it sits. It sits in reconciliation, these pretty documents. So I'm not holding up Adelaide City Council because that's in, I'm not saying Adelaide City Council's it just sits on a shelf. I sit on, I know they do lots of work in this space, but that is a continual criticism of communities, that it just sits on the shelf, or there's the only the polite stuff that's done. So there is a desire for reconciliation action plans to be more relevant and meaningful for people, and have real outcomes, and have a direct link with improving life, you know, the community that you all live in together. And I'll get to that, I promise. And if I don't, bring it up again. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. I tried to do the background thingy, but I think I'm going to destroy whatever I've got going on here. Oh, you're in Mitcham as well?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we're at a similar place to Farley at Burnside. We've had 3 working group meetings, and you know, quite positive, some really good ideas. But similarly to Farley, I'm really interested in how we drive meaningful action. You know, one of the things that occurs to me when I look at places like Adelaide or Marion, even, who are well advanced in their RAP journeys, you know, are probably on their 3rd or 4th RAP. In both cases, I think Adelaide might be at stretch, and possibly Marion as well. But when you look at Aboriginal representation in terms of their employment, it's still not at population parity, which suggests that maybe First Nations people don't see local government as a viable career choice, and that worries me, because I think it should be. There's so many avenues. So we've just started a dialogue with Flinders Uni about trying to get First Nations students through council and work placements as part of their studies. It's very preliminary discussion, but I'm hopeful that might be able to generate something.
Oh, no, definitely agree. And, you know, and people's RAP journeys aren't necessarily, you know, static either. So, you know, it only takes a turnover of staff for an organisation to kind of go, oh, you know what, there's some cultural competencies that we haven't got anymore. We've had a high turnover of staff, or you might have a big influx of staff, and you go, oh my gosh, you know, so it's not an organisation. I've seen it happen a lot. Might be sitting at a stretch level, and they've done the second stretch, and all of a sudden 80% of their staff have changed. You can't claim that you're a stretch level organisation anymore, because you've got to go back and recenter yourself. And that's why this is a fluid process. And you know, you talked about City of Adelaide, and you talked about Marion, you know, and they all have their own challenges as well in this space. And you know, I work with Nicole a lot, because a lot of our events happen in the City of Adelaide. You know, and they work really hard at trying to do that, but still are struggling with the employment parity, and people seeing it as a viable employment option. Same as a piece of work, and we're acutely aware of that. That's why we've got that Reconciliation Industry Network group to see if there's some collective thinking we can do about that. Equally, you know, First Nations participations in the you know, the election process or the candidacy process that you know, obviously the governance models and council representation in that space. There's something in the area that we're keen to focus on as well and support that. Now, make sure I pick up on all those points because I'm going to go through those sections in the wraps later. And if I don't, call me out and keep chatting away if you guys want to, you know, have some commentary because I'll stop. I like the interaction. I hate just talking on my own. So keep chatting away to me. Because we couldn't watch that video, basically it was the same thing as I said before, it's just giving me a chance to have a break. But the wrap process is a framework that sits there and it's done. And we've heard, I think if some of you aren't so familiar, we talked about innovates and stretches. There's an acknowledgement that the wrap framework, that everyone is at a different time and a different space. And it may be that some people are more ready, some people are more not so ready. And each of those areas, each of those different types of wrap, so these are types of wrap frameworks, starting from a reflect wrap, which is basically it's a scoping reconciliation wrap. So it's where you've just started. And this is the time where you want to prepare your organisation. So it's not really sitting there and going out and going hard and trying to find initiatives and you know, you talked about, you know, stimulating economies and you're talking about increasing employment ratios. This wrap is not that. This wrap framework here is really around just starting off. If you've never done a wrap before, this is about preparing your organisation to take the next step. It's understanding where your organisation's at, spending time scoping the relationships you have with community, you know, giving you a chance and giving people an opportunity to acclimatise to your organisation's movement towards this. So, and it also enables you to explore who's around you in your Aboriginal community, but also in your wider community that are allies around reconciliation. And this is a really useful wrap. It goes for 12 months, but this type of a wrap is really useful for the starters, for those that are just getting into the business. It really, like I have to say, it cements you in a good space, especially, I mean, I'm going to be really frank, it's not just a project-based initiative, it is a political initiative as well, because everyone's got something to say around Aboriginal business. In no matter what organisation you're in, someone's always got a particular view, whether it be one of allyship or whether it's one of dismissiveness. You've got the continuum, because that's what our society is. It has a continuum around where people are at. So sometimes in an organisation, you might have individuals that are ready to go within an organisation. You know, project workers or staff might be ready to go, but your political structures might not be ready to go yet. So you might have, for instance, your council, your chambers might not be ready, but your staff and administration might be ready. A reflect wrap will really give you an opportunity to cement down what you want out of a wrap, why it's meaningful, why it's mutually beneficial, why it's valuable for you, or vice versa. You might have a council, chamber that's ready to go, and really want to get on with it, but your administration might not yet be. So, you know, this wrap is really useful for scoping and really giving you a solid foundation for where you want to go into the future. And it's only 12 months, you know, and you know how it works. 12 months doesn't, you know, it's a blink of an eye sometimes, how quick 12 months can go. But it does provide you some breathing space to get people on board with this process ready for you. And it gives you ideas around what you can do in your next wrap. And the pressure is taken off just a fraction when you're looking at an innovate, if you're looking to go to the next stage, which is an innovate wrap. So I talk about in stages. These are not stages, these are just different frameworks. But most often what happens is people jump from one to the other. Has anyone looked at a reflect wrap before or done a reflect wrap? How did you find that process, Sean?
So we're in that process,
You know,
I guess, and the you know, the template's excellent. You know, it's quite prescriptive, and one of the things I did was had a look at Wyalla's Reflect wrap just to see how they took the template and then just added just a couple of actions that are unique to Whyalla. So, whilst it's quite a good formula for a foundation wrap, there was still a little bit of scope to individualize it to their situation. So, we've still got a little way to go to work through the process, but it looks like a really good template to take a team through in the organisation.
Yep, absolutely, and it will, it provides you with 12 months of opportunities to just solidify where you want to go, really, but also gives you an opportunity to hold that mirror up and have a bit of a look, and do that in a way that's comfortable for an organisation. And especially, when local government's quite a unique sector. You've got quite complex relationships with communities historically, but also currently. Things change quickly in government world, whether it's whatever tier of government you're in, it changes quite quickly. So your relationships can be complex, and as will RAPs be. But having that time to understand where your organisation's at is really, really important. So after you've done a successful Reflect wrap, you'll get an opportunity to go into an Innovate wrap, which is what we've decided to do at Reconciliation SA. We decided not to do a Reflect wrap because we felt we'd done a lot of stuff off our own back, but felt so you can jump straight to an Innovate wrap if that's what you want to do. That's one of the major differences between an Innovate wrap and a Reflect wrap is there's a couple of differences. One's more reflect, obviously, internal, you're looking back at who you are, where you've been, what you've got going on in your organisation. An Innovate wrap is a bit more about implementing and thinking of things that you might already be doing, or, just dipping the toe in the water for some new initiatives. The other thing about the difference between the two is how it's governed. So in a Reflect wrap, it is not essential, it is optional to have a Reconciliation Action Plan working group. You do not have to have that in a Reflect wrap, but you do need to have that in an Innovate wrap. So the governance for wraps generally is that you've got your organisational governance and your processes that you have that. But there is a small group of people, 8 to 12, I wouldn't even go to 12, that's just a lot of people to manage in a room, that are designated and come together quarterly to monitor the development, implementation, and ongoing stuff in relation to your wrap. That doesn't need to be there for your Reflect wrap, because the whole goal is that you get to kind of find your friends and find who you want to be on there. So it gives you 12 months to do that. In Innovate wrap, you've got to have one already. So if you decide that you don't want to do a Reflect and you want to go straight to Innovate because you've been doing some really cool stuff already, that you've already done some cultural awareness training, that you've already, put targets down for Aboriginal employment, you've done some procurement arrangements for Aboriginal businesses. We've done some stuff. Let's go to Innovate. You can do that, but you got to make sure you've got a wrap working group that helps you develop and monitor that Innovate wrap. So that needs to be established before you put a submission into Reconciliation Australia. So the Reflect helps you build one. The Innovate assumes you've already got one, and then you can go from there. Innovate wrap, I think you guys have a little chance to read that, but that really focuses in on dipping your toe in the water. You already know who your sphere of influence is. You already know who influences you and who you influence. So you're better able to target some of your deliverables in your Reconciliation Action Plan towards those groups and cohorts of people. You've been able to look back on your organisation and have a vision for reconciliation. You're able to make those statements publicly. You're able to engage with your Aboriginal community and share that with them. And that you're piloting something new for your organisation, not something necessarily what's business as usual, but something that's new and different for your organisation that hasn't been done before. So, and that comes from that information exchange, that comes from that relationship in that wrap working group. It comes from your connectivity with your community. The stretch wrap, which I think Sean you spoke about before, and yes, Adelaide City Council's on their 3rd stretch wrap. I'm not sure about Marion and where they're at, but a stretch wrap is around embedding reconciliation, and it does exactly what the title is, which is, you know, it really pulls that organisation out to another layer. So you're not dipping anymore. You're in the water and you're swimming. You know, sometimes you're swimming with sharks and sometimes you're swimming with fish. You know, it really pushes you and asks organisations to develop longer term strategies, and asks you to, instead of having a population parity employment target, it asks you to have a service demand target for employment. So it might be it's only, you know, 2.8% of your population is First Nations, but then you're saying, well, you know what, but you know, 20% of our workload in our social services is for First Nations community. Does that mean we need to have 20% of our workforce to be parity with that? So it's asking that question in that stretch wrap, which is a huge jump between, do you understand what I'm saying? So it's asking you those questions. It's asking you, is that a long-term strategy for you? The stretch wrap is a 3-year process. The Innovate one is a 2-year, and a Reflect is a 12 months. So they do take, sometimes these longer term strategies are more, require more time. And we know some things take time. You have your ebbs and flows in this space. But what it does ask in all of these wraps is for you to have measurable, defined targets and goals, not just some, oh yeah, we're going to get, you know, not the gunners, the absolutes. You know, this is what we want. This is what we want to do. This is how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it by then. This stretch wrap also assumes that the work you've done in your Innovate wrap will turn into business as usual. So it might be around cultural protocols, become business as usual. This one also assumes that the work that you're doing around cultural training is business as usual, that it's part of your induction processes, that it's not something, something special for you, that it's in, it's in there, it's happening. You don't have to think twice about it. People see value in it, and they don't feel that it's tokenistic. They feel that it's meaningful and it has value for your organisation. So that's an assumption made when you do your stretch wrap, that when you're ready for a stretch wrap, all the stuff that you had in your Innovate wrap is business as usual. There is one more level, and not many people get there. There's only 12 in the nation, and there is no local government, and there is only one federal government. I can't believe that Department for Social Services, Welfare, Centrelink, is an Elevate partner. I nearly fell off my chair when I saw that. But they are, a huge organisation that has huge responsibilities, and they push really hard in this space. They might not always get it right, but the Elevate level is a really significant level around it's leadership in reconciliation, and it's not just leadership in local community, it's leadership at a national level. So most of the people that are sitting in the Elevate group have all made statements around the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which is a highly political document. Not everybody can do that. That's why the government departments really struggle with this one, is because they can't hold on to politically motivated pieces of work. It doesn't fall in line with the turnover in government and leadership and different alliances in that space. But it certainly is one night, for instance, PwC, ABC, Wesfarmers, so the Coles group, they all have Elevate wraps. Oh, my brain's stretching now. Telstra, we just got in trouble. Telstra's got an Elevate wrap. I don't know if they're going to have it for much longer. But there is a whole bunch of big national companies that have Elevate wraps. And they have a responsibility for lots of things. And they also have a responsibility to create societal change and support other wrap partners that aren't at the Elevate level. So our Reflect, our Innovate, and our Stretch wrap partners to implement some of their, deliverables. So, like, for instance, if I'm going to be, I'm always looking for opportunities, but I tap my Elevate partners all the time for sponsorship opportunities, or what can they give me in kind. There are some big, PwC, KPMG, they're all consultancy companies, and there is no reason why local governments can't do this either with their reconciliation action plans, is say, hey, you're an Elevate partner, we're a Reflect or an Innovate partner. is there some partnership opportunities that we can have together to progress reconciliation in our local area? Have you got some lawyers that you can help with us to, who want to do some pro bono work or around First Nations business? Or is there, we want to understand better I'm not just making it up. We want to understand better the local communities' understanding of reconciliation so we can market better and PR better. So you might want to talk to KPMG around some of their PR and marketing consultancies, and can they do low bono or pro bono for your organisation? So, I use that all the time around where do our values or partnership opportunities intersect? How can we kind of benefit each other? Because they benefit too. They benefit by saying, hey, guess what? We get to work with the District Council of Kimber to understand regional connectedness to the reconciliation movement. Like, I'm just, sorry, Kimber, I'm just calling because you were there in the center of my screen. So that's absolutely something that an Elevate partner can do for you as you're growing through the reconciliation movement. So don't think of them as someone separate to you. They're absolutely someone who can be there to support you. In fact, I'm trying to tap them up to help fund some stuff for local government. So, I'll keep going. We'll be all right. For those that haven't seen RAPs before, why on earth would you want to do one apart from the integrity conversation? Or purely, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. It makes a really big difference to your relationships. It makes a big difference to understanding, the history that you live in, but also it makes a difference around the socio-economic outcomes for First Nations peoples in Australia. Let me show you this. What can be achieved? So this is from the 2019 RAP impact statement. So this is like nationally. So don't, I get excited when I see this stuff, but you think about can I tell you a big secret about the RAPs? It's not so secret because I end up telling everybody. So I suck at keeping secrets, obviously. RAPs just aren't about the organisation. RAPs are also about infiltrating individuals. So, when you unlearn and relearn, you take that with you. You don't just leave it at work and pack it up at the end of the day. You also take it home. And I couldn't tell you the amount of feedback I've had around, people who work in organisations who are also mums and dads, once they've done their learning or cultural awareness training and done some unlearning, and then, kind of understand better the state of play, they consciously make decisions at home about how they see or view First Nations matters. So, for instance, I couldn't tell you, I was running a workshop and people were saying to me that was because of their participation in the RAP program, or the organisation's RAP, and undertaking the training and the induction, working with Aboriginal community, working with Aboriginal businesses, that they were witness to some Channel 7 stuff happening on the TV, and they made a conscious decision that they didn't want their children to watch that, so they turned the telly off. So immediately I know that the RAP hasn't just affected the workplace, it's also affected everyone in their household. So it has this duplicating effect that I'm really excited to say is a sneaky thing that the RAPs do that we don't really talk about that much, is that it actually impacts an individual, a human being who has a mum, a dad, an uncle. It takes it home with them, and that's what's so great about this stuff. So, 2.4 million people. Now that's increased since 2018 because there's been an additional 1,000 RAPs that have come out. It's created 11, back then, over now, 12,000 partnerships between RAP organisations and Aboriginal organisations. That's phenomenal. The growth of Aboriginal organisations, community-controlled, Aboriginal businesses, they've flourished in the last 10 years, and it's gone against all trends in the non-Aboriginal sector. Over $44 million in donations have been provided to Aboriginal organisations because of RAPs, since the RAPs have been introduced. That's astounding. That's not a big, phone call centre drive or a morning tea drive. It's none of that. It's absolutely people donating to Aboriginal organisations because their RAP has seen it meaningful to do so and add value to their local community. 6,000 employees have done cultural immersion training. Now, cultural immersion training is much harder than just, I don't know if you know what cultural immersion training is, but that is people going off site of work and living in communities, or for weeks at a time, going and participating in cultural awareness or cultural engagement activities. So it might be living in communities, undertaking cultural activities that, have a greater cultural appreciation for people. 51,000 have done face-to-face cultural learning, which is the next layer down from a cultural immersion. And then 160,000 have done e-learning. So, but most organisations have, this has increased significantly since 2018. I just don't have the numbers. But these, you can see that lots of people have all of these in their wraps. So they have e-learning as part of the induction. Then they have cultural training, face-to-face learning as part of a deliberate training program within the organisation. And then the cultural immersion one is, people going further. And that's mostly, if I can, be crude about it, it's probably senior leadership that does your cultural immersion training. And, those that are in senior leadership positions tend to do the cultural immersion stuff. Again, student scholarships. I don't know if you knew this, but nearly $17 million in educational scholarships have been provided through the RAP program. $8 billion in goods and services have been directed towards Aboriginal businesses. So when I talk about the growth of Aboriginal businesses, your RAP asks you to do that. And that's a direct correlation between the procurement deliverables sitting in each of your RAPs. Employment, 41,500 Aboriginal people were employed in RAP organisations. You talk about employment outcomes, so RAP can push you, if you let it, increase your Aboriginal employment opportunities. And $32 million worth of pro bono support come to Aboriginal organisations. So, I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. That's not even counting the pro bono that goes to non-Aboriginal organisations to support First Nations communities. So that's just counting the direct to Aboriginal organisations, which is pretty amazing. So there are lots of benefits to the RAPs. You've seen them there. But if you're going to say to me, Shona, what is it going to do for me for this RAP? Is it something worthwhile for me? Well, obviously I'm going to say yes, and this is why I'm going to say yes. It turns those good intentions and the gunner-gunners into the doer-doers. It gets you into that space. It reaffirms some integrity within your organisation, and it really provides you with some governance, good governance around accountability, around those action plans. There's a great community that are RAP partners that are all there to support each other, and I talked about how you can hit each other up for stuff. That's a really good to know that you've got that there, and a good support network for that is pretty phenomenal. And also there's this collegialness around, what we really struggled with that RAP deliverable. How did you get over that? Or how did you get past that particular issue or that challenge? Having that relationship with each other and that network helps support that. You can see that there. I'll provide you with these slides. But yeah, is there any questions around the benefits of RAPs, or if you've been through a RAP process, the benefits that you found that I haven't got up there that I'd love to hear about? No? That's all right. You don't have to talk. I can talk to myself. I'm very good at it. Because we're about to go, are you ready to get started? That was just the intro. I told you that was just the intro. The last hour and a half. Well, now I'm going to get into it. Does anyone need a break to go to the bathroom, get a coffee, get some water? Great, go do it, because I'm starving for a drink, if that makes sense. 5 minutes and we'll come back. Yeah, I'm not going to mute because it's not good. All right, 5.
Excellent, thanks.
Right. Am I going to get back in? Hey, Farley, how you going? Hope I'm not on mute. Mute.
How are you, Shona? It's Farley.
Yeah, how are you?
You doing okay?
Yeah, no, I'm all good. I'm all good. How are you?
Yeah, we're good. We're good, thank you.
Awesome. Have you, where are you at? Are you at anything at a wrap? Are you Innovate, Reflect?
We're Reflect, and we've started, but we've had a couple of other major projects going on in the background here. So we've got our Kensington Gardens redevelopment, and we're actually creating a whole site. So we've got a Ghana reference group. It's got a significant site within this redevelopment. So we're doing a place called a place of reflection. So our priority focus has been on that. But that's actually been an amazing project to really set those foundation relationships.
So who have you got in your Ghana? Who's your Ghana connection? Which one?
So with the reference group, we've got Jeffrey Newchurch, Mel Simpson, Lynette Crocker pokes her head in. Michelle,
Yeah,
who else have we got?
they get around. They all get around though.
Yeah. But on our RAP working group, we've got Lynette, sort of, I guess, the elder, and then we've got Rennie Simpson. We're just looking for a couple of extra members as we go. So the RAP itself hasn't been our number one priority. It's been more the project on Kensington Gardens Reserve, because we've actually throughout that process, because of the monitoring, we've actually been able to create, we're up to 5 positions now, 5 apprenticeships, where the apprentices not only do the monitoring, but they actually are part of the whole project and employed by Camco, who is the company actually doing the redevelopment. So
Cool.
it's going really well.
Yes. Actually, I reckon your CEO and your mayor came to our last reconciliation.
Yes,
group.
and I was there as well. Was it the first one?
You were. We've only had one.
Yeah, because do you remember they were like, we have to keep these at CEO and mayor level, and I was like,
oh,
okay, I'm actually in the room.
Shame, dog. But they want. I know they want a project officers one. And I've just gone to the feds in the state actually to say, can you, this is 3 levels of government. How about you both cop up a bit and give us a project officer so we can run a project officers group, because they're different, they're different cohorts and they do different things. And
absolutely,
as I said, these reconciliation is a political matter, and you need to make sure that you tick off on that political space. But at the end of the day, you're not going to find the mayors, just because it's not their job, hitting the pavement in terms of the implementation of the deliverables of the RAP. It's the project staff that's doing that. So there needs to be some support mechanism for that.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. I reckon I've got 6 months worth of funds to help with that, maybe.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So I'm just waiting for the feds to say yes, and then I'm just going to con the state government into something.
Yeah. Oh, nice work. No, I think the project officer one would be really good, because I think then we can actually look at projects, but also, cross-council opportunities and that kind of thing as well, I think would be really valuable. So
completely. There's no such thing as borders, is there?
No, that is right.
It is. Which I had, I know we've got most people, if everyone's back online, let me know. Just wave your hand or something, because there's a lot of people without a camera on, so I don't know if anyone's there. I'm meeting with Google Maps. I'm really excited to see if I can get some First Nation overlays on Google Maps. So when you talk about borders, I'm really excited that Google Maps were excited to talk to me. And I thought, ooh, when Google's happy to talk to you, there's something wrong with the universe. That's for sure. All right, I am going to get started on the next one because it is, as I've predicted, I've talked heaps, and it's 10:21, and I want you. There's 10 more slides left, which is, you know, you'd be most grateful for. But this is the bit that talks about RAPs and how you can. Oh, for goodness sake, here we go. How you can get started. You need to identify what the best RAP for you is, because RAPs are different for everyone. Like I said before, you're all different levels, so or different spaces, different places, and what, you know, it might be that you're stretched one day and then, but you need to go back to innovate the next day because you've had some changes in your organisation, or there's an incident that happens. You know, you talked about there's a sacred, you know, a very special site Farley that's in your area. You know, you might get that completely wrong and upset, you know, some traditional owners in that space, dare I say Yunkin George or Lake Torrens. You know, there's, you know, something might happen that's really disturbing or upsets community, and they're asking you to revisit your organisation's value bases in that space. And that can happen all the time. And it's okay, because if you have to revisit, you have to revisit, but you know what, you've got engagement, if you've got people that want to have a conversation with you about it. So if you're going to look at a reflect one, if any of these ring true to your organisation or to your council, then I recommend looking at a reflect RAP for you. If you're just starting off, if you've got limited relationships with the Aboriginal community, or if you've got poor historical relationships with the Aboriginal community, if you need time to engage because you just haven't had that connection before, if you don't have a working group and you don't know how to get one going, give yourself 12 months to set something up. If your organisation, I've made a spelling mistake, sorry. If your organisation don't know who your Aboriginal stakeholders are, then I think not under who that, I don't even know what I wrote there. Just forget that last point. I don't know if anyone wants to be under people, but organisations that are underrepresented or don't understand who the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander staff and external stakeholders are. There we go. I will edit that later. Yes.
Sorry, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
I presume when you're considering what level's right for you, it doesn't necessarily have to be that all those things apply, just some of them. Like, so for argument's sake, at Mitcham, we don't have a great understanding of who we should be engaging with from Ghana, but we do have an internal working group. So, you know, we've chosen Reflect as the right level for us. I presume it is okay to have a working group in place, even though you're aiming at Reflect. Is that
absolutely right? There is, you know, who's going to say don't consult with a working group? You know, like, absolutely. If you've still got one, but you still feel that it's important to take your time and establish a solid foundation, do it. I would say if you've got, like, my recommendation is if you've got any reservations around a reflect RAP or a RAP, or any, even if you've got, like I said, you know, part of your organisation really wants to go there, but there's another part that's like, oh, look, we're not quite sure. You know, you're better off just doing a reflect. It takes 12 months. It gives you an opportunity to set some stuff in stone. Absolutely.
And can I just ask one other question in relation to working groups? Is there a definition of what a working group needs to consist of or include? Can it be entirely staff? Does it need to have people external to the organisation in it, or does it become more a committee when it's got external?
Yep. No, and look, on a reflect RAP, I wouldn't, you know, there's a natural assumption that you're still to develop really and solidify relationships with your Aboriginal community, and that there's a recognition that maybe your entire RAP working group is internal to the organisation at that stage. It is an expectation that as you get more confident in this space and you understand your sphere of influence more, the more you connect with Aboriginal community, the more likely it is that you will have Aboriginal staff in your organisation, or Aboriginal stakeholders or external community members come on to your RAP as you become a leader or a innovate partner or a stretch partner or an elevate partner itself. So absolutely, as you grow your RAP, you grow your working group and you grow the external. So there are some RAP working groups that at the stretch level have you know, a 50-50 split, co-chair arrangements. Also, they also have in 50-50 in terms of organisation and external. And believe it or not, you know, the owner of the local bakery sits on as an external member, just as you know, as a community member. And you know, they participate fully in a RAP working group. So just, it doesn't have to be someone from your work area. You're looking for someone and a working group that can give you the best representation of your community, really. And for councils, it might be someone who is an ally in this space, someone who always puts up the flag on, you know, out the front of the shop in NAIDOC week. Go, hey, you know, you seem really interested in this stuff. Do you want to come, you know, connect with us on this? And, you know, have them as external working, you know, external member on your, you know your community and where your strengths are and where your movers and shakers are. But you only know that, I think, from doing that reflect process, from understanding that. So that's why this RAP is really good, because it will give you that. So long-winded answer. There is no expectation to have external members or Aboriginal members in a reflect stage or an innovate stage, but it is an expectation that as you become more aware, you start introducing people, because you want that diversity of views sitting on your RAP working group for accountability.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Easy. Is an innovate best for you? Well, I'd say if it's for you, you're ready to begin implementing strategies, you understand your organisation better, you've held up that mirror, you've said, oh, you know what, we pretty much understand that we've got gaps in all these areas, and we think an innovate RAP can do that. So you might do your reflect RAP and go, dang, we don't have any cultural awareness training or access to local providers that can give us cultural awareness training, or our HR policies exclude Aboriginal people from participating in funerals or sorry business. They're not considerate of that because there are some significant spiritual connection needs that need to be considered in this space. But your innovate RAP might go, you know what, you've looked at all that, now let's make those changes. So you've done your research, or if you are at a stage where you're aware of all that and you've made some changes already, you might want to start looking at how can that flow out across the organisation. So it might be, how do you assist your finance department in, you know, thinking beyond numbers and how the procurement line, you know, you can start setting procurement goals. So if you don't have to be trapped into this, you know, we've done reflect and we've done innovate. You can jump straight to innovate. You might have some shortcomings in terms of your awareness of your organisation, but you've done some, you know, some really good stuff off your own back. So, you know, I think Farley, you were talking about you've done some really good work, or you're doing some work and got a few initiatives up and running in Burnside. You know, do you need to do a reflect RAP? I'm just asking. Maybe it's an innovate RAP you've done. You need to do.
Well, I started to question that when you were talking about it, and then I was like, oh, baby steps, baby steps. I don't know.
You know, it's a 2-year process. So it might be the first 6 months that you can accelerate the first 6 months to do some of those core actions in the reflect RAP and put that into your innovate RAP. And the rest of the 2 years, you've stretched yourself. So you've already talked about, you already got Ghana people connected with you. You're already thinking about career progression opportunities and Aboriginal accountability. You know, it might be that that's one of your key projects that sits under the banner of your RAP. You know, so it might be that, you know, maybe you don't need to do reflect. Maybe you're ready for an innovate RAP because you've got some really, you know, you've got people in your organisations that are ready for that. But you've got to make that call. And there's templates, and you can look at each of the templates and then make an assessment around that. And, you know, when you register to get your RAP, you automatically get flung a template that can help you do that. But I can help you with some of that stuff as well. So, you know, if you're thinking about a RAP, and if you're in this kind of webinar, that Zoomy thing, this is, you know, I'll be saying reflect, innovate. I wouldn't, you know, next week I've got some stuff with those that have done RAPs before, and we're going to be talking about maybe stretch level or innovate level with them next week. But so these are the kind of the indicators for if you think any of those relate to you, or a mixture of those relate to you, then you're probably ready to do an Innovate RAP. And you can also look at other people's Innovate RAPs and see what they're doing as well. You go, oh, too easy, we can do that, that's not a problem. Or no, that's a bit beyond us. It helps you, if you look at other people and spy on other people's stuff in a good way, it gives you a bit of a handy hint, a helpy helper around where it's pitched at and do you think you're there. I'll try and find some council RAPs for you so you can have a look in one location. I might see if I can put them. Maybe I might ask the LGA to upload them, any council RAPs. Yeah.
The Reconciliation Australia website has a like a link on it that you can look at every organisation in Australia with a RAP, and you can filter on local government and state. So it'll give you, I think from memory, there might be maybe half a dozen or 8 councils in South Australia that have them, and it's got them all there. You can click straight on them.
Awesome. Do that, check them out, but also check out other states. You know, Victoria is pretty heavy on the reconciliation space, and looking at that from there. I mean, they've got a very complicated local government system over there. Ours is much more simple, but you know, don't filter by state, filter by nation, and you might get some more and have a look what other states are doing in their local government area as well. The RAP process is designed around the SMART acronym. I know I don't like acronyms very much. My kids make up acronyms and they're not as nice as these ones. But there is, they operate under the SMART one, which is, you know, all the good RAP. So it turns it into good, you know, like the aim of the RAP is it gives you that framework. It turns good intentions into action. It sets realistic and defines your goals, and it makes you take responsibility for implementing it. Because I think we can all have said that, you know, there's plenty of times we've wanted to do stuff and we started it and we dropped it because 1, it got too hard, or 2, money was withdrawn, or 3, kind of passion went away. A RAP is a commitment, and it'll hold you publicly accountable for that. And as you saw, Reconciliation Australia will call you out if you don't do it. They did it to Rio Tinto, they did it to Telstra. You know, if there's something that you're not following through on, they will call you out. But they were big time things. I have seen them and I have heard them have, you know, one-on-one conversations on the phone to say, you know, you wrote this stuff down, you didn't do anything. So you report every 12 months on your RAP. So they will know your progress. And that's what you sign up for, because sometimes people need that, you know. I've tried to lose weight heaps of times, you know, but nothing ever works unless the doctor checks me on the scales, you know, so it's the same sort of concept. Obviously I need to go back to my doctor, but that's okay. I've been hiding them. So the SMART function, or the SMART acronym really asks or gets you to do the plan, be specific. So define an endpoint and a goal. It's asking you for that. It asks you to measure. It wants you to track how you're going. The SMART process asks you to make it achievable. So don't push yourself too far that you're not going to go there. So you might have, so, you know, people ask me all the time that, you know, like I think Farley even, you know, we're really good in some areas, but we might not be in the other. You know, I know that there are some people that I've worked with who have decided just to do the reflect because, yes, they are good at some things, but there are other things they're not so good at. So let's keep doing the stuff that we're good at and give us some time to work on the things that we need to catch ourselves up with. I would love to, you know, I've been working with some people now and I'd love to give examples, but unfortunately, you know, commercial confidence agreements with them in that space. Relevant. Biggest thing about reconciliation is relevance. So, and that's why there's flexibility in the framework and the templates, is that you need to make that reconciliation action plan and the goals in there to be relevant to you. So, you know, what's going on in Port Pirie might not be relevant to what's going on in Kimber, or what's going on in Mitcham or Burnside. Whatever's going on for you is going to be very different, and you need to make sure it's about you. And it's a very selfish tool. It is about you. It is about your relationship with the First Nations community. It is about your organisation. don't ever deviate from that. Don't ever compare yourself to somebody else or another organisation. It is solely about you, and it is a very intimate relationship between yourself and that RAP. Make it time bound too. So set really clear, defined time limits. It is really important that you do that, and otherwise time lags on. If you don't meet your time limit, you know, you're going to, obviously the goal was too much or you didn't put enough into it. So you've got to make sure that the goal is right and set your time limit accordingly. Once you've decided on what RAP framework is right for you, so you've jumped into the space, I'm doing a reflect, I'm going to do an innovate. There are 4 key areas that you need to obviously talk about, and I talked about that, and this is kind of like summarising those SMART ones. Get your action, understand what that action is, and most of the time Reconciliation Australia have given that to you, what they want to see, and then they've also given you the scope to add a couple extra that are specific to you. Then you'll have a deliverable. So you think about, if you're going to do a table, your actions is your first one, deliverables the next one. And Rec Australia have given you some deliverables, but there's an expectation that you'll tailor those deliverables to you, and then you will add some more deliverables to each action point. Then it's going to ask you very specifically who is responsible. And they're not asking you what division responsible. They're not asking you, you know, they want to know what the title of the position of the person who is responsible for that action. So this is how specific they want it. So they want Executive Director of Human Resources, or Project Officer for Cultural Inclusion, or the CEO, or the Chairperson of the RAP Working Group. It is asking you for an individual's title. We don't need to put their name because names change, positions change all the time, but they really want you to put the title of the person. They also want the timeline, and they want timeline in terms of that this deliverable, this deliverable under this action is going to be completed by June 2021 or September. So it's on month year format. And if it's an ongoing one, you put ongoing reviewed at June 2021, June 2022, or whatever it might well be. So they're asking you to be very specific. And I think you saw that from that SMART acronym that they've asked. They really want you to get down into the very specifics, because that holds you accountable, but it also provides you with some clear guidance and assurances to community that you're serious about this. So you can see that there. That's some of the things you see in that RAP template that comes out to you. Action includes the objectives your organisation will focus on. Most of the time, Reconciliation Australia gives that to you, but you need to add some of your own. So you need to understand there might be some other things that Rec Australia haven't got in there that you want to achieve that fit under the goal stuff. So I know Farley, for instance, there is nothing in a reflect or an innovate RAP that talks about significant sites. So it might be that you add an action around ensure, you know, the action, I'm just pulling it out of nowhere, that the action might be ensure that significant sites within our local area are treated with respect and dignity. And then your deliverable might be, there's a whole bunch of deliverables that sits in there, and how you're going to do that. You know, develop a Ghana reference group to help and support and guide you through that. Ensure 5 traineeships, minimum, at least 5 traineeships are provided to help in the monitoring of our, do you know what I mean? So, you know, you can see how that sets up. Obviously, again, accountability, who's doing it, and the time-bound stuff, month, year format. I know it sounds like I'm, you know, a bit of a broken record, but you'll understand why when you get your comments back from Reconciliation Australia, why I go on about the simplest of things. The biggest comments relate to who's accountable and what's your time frame, because most people take that for granted, but Rec Australia really focused in on that as well. Just with your deliverables, it's only really the stretch partners that measurable targets start appearing. So for Reflect and Innovate, they tend not to ask you to, I mean, apart from the employment one, they tend not to ask you, you know, for instance, 50% of our staffing ratio undertake cultural awareness training. That only really gets asked at a stretch level. It's not really asked at an Innovate and Reflect level. It's not, you know, that's something that you build the knowledge about during those areas around the capability of your organisation to do that. Some councils have only got 3 people. So, you know, there are some councils that have 1,000. You know, so you're not expected to do, you know, with 3 people in your organisation, it's much harder to do that. And you know, it might be that you broaden those definitions, like you know, Kimber had that hand up there with 3 people. It might be that you include your actual council in that space, or that that your RAP takes, you know, your elected members and you into account, not just you as your administration. Might be that there's an opportunity to team up with another small council close by, and you know, you can do things together in that space. I'm not quite sure. I love driving past Kimber, but I'm not pretty familiar with the council zones up there. So yeah, it's very much around what you and tailoring it to your specific needs. The RAP, so that's kind of like the expectations and the kind of like nitty gritty. But when you get your RAP delivered to you, it comes in 4 kind of sections, 4 areas. And you can see there in that little, I don't know, Roman building, cathedral type building. I think there is, I don't know what it's called, the Colosseum thing. You can see that it overarches with the dimensions of reconciliation, and you can see the importance of governance and reporting down the bottom. And there are some pillars that hold that up. And a RAP asks you to look at all these pillars. It asks you to look at, so the actions and the deliverables are kind of grouped into these areas: relationships, respect, opportunity, and governance. Now, everyone thinks governance is a boring one because it asks you about reporting dates, but I love governance. Like, I really do. I think governance is the key to all of this. But in that RAP template, this is where the stuff goes. So relationships, you know, that is, you know, for me, I've talked about it before, it's the heart of reconciliation. And those deliverables that are sitting under the relationship section, which is the first section of your RAP, to be fair, or is it? Yes, respect is second. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's asking you to look at how you're going to build trust, how you're going to build respect, and how are you going to look at anti-racism strategies in this space. So that will ask you to do that in that section. In that section, it's asking also around getting an understanding around where the attitudes and the biases sit within your organisations, and how you can, it's asking you to look at how you can change that in a positive direction. So for us, I think that relationship section, it's even got, hang on, let me just open this one here. I did have a, sorry, here we go, relationships. It is the first one. Watch out, Brussels sprout. So it is asking you to develop 2-way partnership agreements, understanding your sphere of influence. It's asking you to think about how you can engage Aboriginal community into your organisation. This is where it's a great opportunity to think about your RAP working group and who you can have come on board with your RAP working group. It's also asking you to look at leadership in your organisation on this space. So ambassadors, who can be allies and who can be vocal about this. So that's something that's really important in that RAP. I don't really like that. That's a hard one. No, how come I've got all these stretch RAPs? I just want a, here we go. There we go. It also asks you to do some things around, to kind of dip your toe, I suppose, to promote reconciliation as well within your sphere of influence. So, for instance, you might have, you know, information around National Reconciliation Week, and, you know, promoting National Reconciliation Week across your sphere of influence. So it might be, you know, whether it's a, you know, banners in the street or flyers or emails out to, you know, some of your key partners in your community. It's asking you to communicate publicly, you know, around reconciliation. So I think it's really, it's a really important one because it's one that you get to do that demonstrates your commitment through the interpersonal relationships between your organisation and and the community, and First Nations community and the wider community as well. Some things that have grown out of this section have been things like leader-to-leader meetings. So I've seen it where there's been, so it might be the chairperson of the local Aboriginal Community Council has, this particular deliverable has meant that they have a regular, biannual meeting or a quarterly meeting with the CEO of the local council. I've seen that happen out of this deliverable. So how cool is that? Is that you get together every quarter and you can discuss things that are mutually beneficial to each other, and how you want to, how any agreements that you want to make around land use, or any agreements that are, kind of hot topics for the both of you. You can troubleshoot some stuff that's going on. So out of this relationships one, I've seen some of that stuff grow, which has been really exciting. It also has been a risk mitigator as well. So it might be an opportunity for the council to go, hey, guess what? We're really keen on doing this, but we probably need your support to, make it happen a bit more, because it might not go down as well in this area. And, it's a great way that they can work together and develop some real partnerships between the community, community councils or community and yourselves. So relationships is a really important one, and that's why it's the first one that's in the wrap. The next one is respect, and this is around cultural protocols, understanding and being aware of cultural protocols. Now, everyone talks about acknowledgement and welcome to countries, and yes, they're really important, and yes, some people see them as tokenistic, but that's probably because I do a lot of work around working with, I'm doing some work with Anglicare SA. I'm also doing some work with some other groups around helping people make their own acknowledgement of country and making it meaningful themselves. We all got our own story and relationship with community. Mine's from Northern Territory and me coming here, so I always share that one. But this is around, bringing those cultural protocols to life and making them meaningful, and not just making them tokenistic. So you just don't read out the text or block text that sits there at the front of a meeting where people kind of tune out. This is around displaying cultural protocol, learning about the protocol, why it's important. And the only way you can do that is by connecting with your local community and hearing about what the protocol should be and why it's important and why it's of value to you. This one also talks about NAIDOC Week, not Reconciliation Week. So the relationship one talks about Reconciliation Week. The respect one talks about NAIDOC Week, because there's a clear difference between the two. One is around relationships and Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal community coming together. NAIDOC Week is around celebrating Aboriginal culture. And it's absolutely about respecting culture, respecting the uniqueness and the First Peoples of the country. So that respect also picks up on the historical stuff and understanding and paying respects to maybe some of the truth-telling stuff that we talk about in local areas and that happened early on, but also about respecting the relationship. So, understanding what's going on now in your community and, connecting and having one-on-ones with your community around how you'd like that respect to be shown and displayed publicly. A lot of people do public displays of artworks, murals, they do namings of buildings, renaming of streets. I've seen that done before. I've seen etchings, and I've seen even a reconciliation building being built, and each room in there has been, renamed. I know that there's some renaming going on for room 7.2 and 7.3 in the Adelaide City Council. So, there's, renaming around significant Aboriginal community members that have contributed to the council. Even paying homage and respect to those communities that have really, made their mark on who you are today. So that's the respect section. The opportunity section, which I promised to get to for Burnside and Mitcham, is really focused around outcomes-driven stuff. So that is increased retention and recruitment and retention of Aboriginal staff within your organisation. Now, with a council of 3 people, that's really hard to do that. But there are great when we think about that, we think about, well, if we can't recruit people, how can we engage people in our organisation? Can we offer internships, student placements. You know, what's our volunteer base look like? Do we look at our volunteers and how we can better recruit Aboriginal people to our volunteer base? You know, I know that there's a lot of work being done. You know, we work with our local sporting clubs and sporting teams. Does our work extend to that space? Let's think about how can we seed you know, people's interest, like you were talking, Sean, before. You know, there's a seeding that needs to happen. I work a lot with the defence industry, and they tell me there's just no one out there suitably qualified that we can meet our employment targets. And I said, well, are you investing in this space? You know, and look, defence companies have more money than local government. I know that. But but the same concept applies. It's not always about money. It's about those negotiations. I'm excited to hear that you're working with Flinders around that some stuff. But you know, for instance, the defence companies said, well, are you offering STEM programs for Aboriginal students and scholarships to help them get those qualifications? It might not be something that pays off now, but it might be something that pays off 10 years down the track. You know, scholarships for universities, and are you feeding the system? So if you can't get your employment rate up, but can you feed the system that you're in, which is really important. And that's, you know, your political sciences. You know, are you going to, you know, your universities, can you engage with them in that space? You know, you might be able to take a placement out in your area, which isn't too onerous and sponsored by somebody else. So I do that all the time. I take student placements for my benefit and then coincidentally for theirs as well. It also asks you the opportunity sections, how to improve social and economic outcomes. So this is around looking at your procurement strategy. That's something you can do. We purchase all the time. And I'm not talking about procurement around, oh, there's a cultural event coming up, let's get someone on board. Almost 100% of my procurement line, down to my tissues and hand sanitizer, is with an Aboriginal organisation. Not everybody can do that because you like to support locally, and I absolutely get that, because you've got, obviously, you want to build the economic growth within your local area. But think about in your local area, is there Aboriginal businesses that you can procure services from? Whether it be catering, whether it be cleaning services, because there's a few Aboriginal cleaning companies out here in South Australia. You know, whether it be temp services, whether it be printing services. So I don't even know if you know that there are 3 Aboriginal printing companies here in Adelaide. You know, Okadawn, Print Junction, and We Create, Design, Deliver. Are you getting your printing done through those businesses? So you're contributing to the Aboriginal. We saw that business, $8 billion going to Aboriginal businesses. You can contribute to that by just simply diverting or sharing out your procurement and your purchasing power, basically. Designing, you know, we get things designed all the time. There are over 50 Aboriginal graphic design artists in South Australia. You know, not just on your wrap, but have you thought about your business plan being designed by an Aboriginal graphic designer? Have you thought about, you know, it might be building wraps or the wraps on your, not like WRAP, not RAP, car wraps, bus wraps, train wraps. They're all done, you know, and they can be done by Aboriginal designers, printed by Aboriginal designers. You can have an Aboriginal supply chain. Even some of the paper materials. Oh, there's a dude that looks like Kevin Rudd. Huh. Anyway, so it's really, you know, think about that. Think about what can you change internally, and this is where you get your finance team and your corporate team to think about. They have a role in this if they want to, and what have you got available to you that you can do with that. The other part of this also is thinking about what's stopping people coming in. So we have, the RAP will ask you to have a look at your recruitment processes. This is in your opportunity section. It'll ask you to look at your HR and recruitment policies and procedures, and to see if there's something that's actually stopping people from coming in. Have you got Aboriginal people sitting on your recruitment panels? Are you advertising in you know, publications that Aboriginal people are viewing or have access to? You know, sometimes it's the way we do things, the old way of doing things, that stops people engaging with us. And then it also asks you to add some more around your opportunities. So, you know, really think about, you know, there might be some great initiatives that you've going on currently within your area. You know, there might be opportunities to work with other councils. So it might be opportunity is just to team up with another council and have, you know, that you share a boundary with, to have a, you know, a cross-fertilisation of, you know, of activities. I know, you know, you think about the, you know, in the city, you've got the River Torrens that goes, you know, all the way, you know, I think it hits 6 or 7 different councils. You know, there's an opportunity that exists there for those councils to do, you know, some cross-fertilisation. Okay, no worries. Somebody's gone. Farley's gone. Yeah, so there are great opportunities that exist in this space. You know, for instance, I've got one here. So Department of Child Protection have done an Innovate Wrap, and they're the one I'm looking at because they're the most recent one. And they have, for instance, done one around investigating opportunities to prove services to Aboriginal kids with disabilities. Now, that wasn't in the original template, but they know that for them, there's an area around Aboriginal children in care with disabilities. They've got a high rate of fetal alcohol syndrome. They've got a high rate of drug-dependent children. They've got a high rate of birth defects sitting in the guardianship teams. And so they believe that it's really important that they added that activity that's specific to them. But there is an opportunity to for them to influence other people, right? For instance, the NDIS for Aboriginal kids in care and quicker access to NDIS services. So that's an opportunity for them. Now, that's huge for South Australia and be able to shortcut the system and develop protocols for quicker access to NDIS services for Aboriginal GOM kids. And also around, they see an opportunity for their workers, and they've got something here around guiding caseworkers and upskilling their caseworkers to work this particular cohort, Aboriginal children with disabilities. So that's something quite niche to them. It's something very specific, but you'll have something within your location that's very specific and very, you know, for instance, I know that Mitcham has made some commitments around the Uluru Statement, or tried to make some commitments around the Uluru Statement from the Heart. That's niche for you. And I know that there was a community vote to, you know, endorse one a RAP process, but also, you know, support for the Uluru Statement. That's something very specific to Mitcham. It's not done anywhere else. So there's an opportunity for you to look at what you want to do with that, whether it's, you know, just, I know Unley has a, well, I don't know if they meant to have it or it accidentally happened, Uluru Statement from the Heart support group that is in the Unley region. I don't know if it's connected to the Unley Council, but it's certainly an opportunity for them to investigate a relationship with that support group. So there's something that's quite unique, and it's not necessarily in the template, but it's something you can put in. And the last section is governance, and that is all about your RAP working group. It's all about the monitoring and implementation of your commitments. It's about accountability, and it's about the development of your next RAP. So you can also add in there, and I think we did, we added a First Nations assembly for us, which is, a Aboriginal youth, a reconciliation youth council. So we recognise that one of the governance a voice of young people in our reconciliation plan was missing altogether, and their capacity as young people to have a greater say over reconciliation as our future leaders. So in our reconciliation action plan, we've really pushed hard for a youth voice in reconciliation. So we've added that as an opportunity for us, as a governance, as part of our governance arrangements, that we want to establish a youth reconciliation council to help guide the development of the next RAP, but also to you know, hold us accountable around making sure that youth voice is heard in every component of our reconciliation action plan and the work that we do. Has anyone got any questions? Cool. So that is, just checking the time, it's 11 o'clock. I'm nearly done though, there's only 3 more slides. So you're going to say, okay, Shona, I have decided that we want to do a Innovate RAP or a Reflect RAP. What do I do? How do I do it? So this is like the steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, there's 6 steps. This is it. The light blue colours are optional because it's not necessarily needs to be done for Reflect RAPs, but if you've got it, why not do it? Like I think Farley was saying, she's got that little group running, so there's my well to do it. Familiarise yourself. Go on to Rec Australia, and Sean put the link in there. Thank you very much. Go to Rec Australia. It's the site. not Google, filter local government and have a look nationally at what's going on out there. Look where everyone's at. Get an idea. I mean, it's not for you to copy, but it's for you to get a bearing on where other people are at. And I think try and find a council that's similar to yourself, a similar size to yourself. There's no use looking at the city of Sydney if you are a small regional council. Like, it's just not worth it. Even I wouldn't even do that if I was the City of Adelaide, to be honest, because Sydney is so huge. But you might have, Wollongong, or you might have, Wagga Wagga might have one. Go and have a look at another council that's similar size to you and see what they're doing. Get on the phone and call their RAP project officer and have a yarn with them. They are, trust me, people who do reconciliation action plans are desperate to talk to people. They're keen to understand how other people are doing their business, and they would welcome a phone call because they've found a friend. Familiarise yourself with that framework. I know I talked about it. I said 3 core pillars here, but governance is the other one, which is kind of like the foundation. Do seriously check out, reflect, or innovate, whether that's best for you, because, and it might be, sometimes, it's a call that's not, it might be a political call, or it might be a practical call, but that's going to depend on each council around what messaging they want to send to their community. And it's a really important one to start off on. Slow and steady wins the race is my advice to everyone in this space. So the next step is get yourself a really good working group. So some people have done this where they've got a RAP development group, and that's how they start off. So like for me at RecSA, we did have a RAP development group because I can't maintain, and that was ended up with like 18 people because there were so many different areas I needed to explore. But I'm going to dump half of those in the nicest possible way, because I can't have 18 people. It's not practical for me to have 18 people monitor my RAP. I've already got a board that's monitoring it. I've got 9 on my board, but for a RAP working group, we only need 8 to 10 people on there. Establish. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I've done that. I've had a development group, and then I've had a RAP working group. Or your RAP working group might serve as your RAP development group as well. That's absolutely how most people do it. There is really important that you find someone senior within your organisation to be your champion. Now, a champion is a person who will defend your RAP, who will stand up, who will inspire people to come on board with this journey, someone who will keep you motivated if you're the one who is doing a lot of the work in this space. And I think the other part is, got something funny there, if you can, with your working group, especially at not the reflect stage, but the innovate stage, look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, First Nations representation at that at the innovate level. Now, this is something that you'll have to do at your reflect stage. If you don't have it at a innovate level, make it a part of your deliverables that you will do that, and make it part of your deliverables that you'll do that within the first 6 months, if that's where you're at with an innovate one, because it really starts getting, you can explore your sphere of influence within that 6 months to get someone on board. The next one is engage and consult. So with the reflect one, it's not an essential requirement to go out and do engagement and consultation. And it's not an expectation that you do that, because you're still learning about who you're connected to, where you are, what the state of play is. So that's not something that's there for your effect. There are some organisations that are connected and want to do that engagement and consultation, and don't, if you've got that, do it, use it, use whatever you've got in your toolbox to give you the best information you can. But if you don't have it in your toolbox, don't stress about it, because that's what that first 12 months in the reflect RAP's about, is to fill that toolbox up. So if you don't have it, if you do have it, identify who they are, look internal and external, and look at your sphere of influence. So look at who influences you in all areas of your business, whether it be funders, whether it be community, whether it be business owners, whether it be your contractors, and then look at who you influence. So your procurement line, your staffing, your ratepayers. You think about who you influence. So you've got to think about those two when you think about engaging with people. can't understand what level of engagement you want. So a lot of the state government mob do. So we do some fee for service just so I can, float, because government doesn't give me anything. So some of my fee for service, I do some consultations. So I use the multiple methods of this. So I do surveys. Some state governments do have your say. I don't know if you've seen them out and about. So you've got to have your say. So you might have a local council mechanism already around how people can feed back into your organisation. You can utilise it at that surface level. When I do my RAP consultations, I interview at least 30 individuals face to face, and I type it up and I evaluate all that rich raw data. These are mostly people in their stretch RAPs, not in an innovate RAP level. I don't tend to do that. On an innovate level, I tend to keep it at the quite the surface level. I do broad surveys, have your say stuff, and there might be a couple of interviews with some champions or chairpersons of a RAP working group. But you do need to understand what level of consultation and engagement you want to do. And they will help define what's important for that stakeholder group. For instance, some of the stuff we've discovered is that people have done RAPs. Like you talk about some councils have done 6 or 7 RAPs. We've discovered in some conversations that, well, guess what? They might have done all those RAPs and that's great, but it's always relied on one individual to implement it. And if that person dropped it tomorrow, that whole system is gone. So there needs to be significant work done to make the internals of that organisation more robust. More people need to know about it. More people need to carry the load. It can't just be one person. Or we found out in one organisation that nobody knew about the RAP. So there was this RAP, and it was fantastic. And they, managed to wordsmith there a whole bunch of stuff. But when we went in there, only 4% there were 3,000 staff, and only 4% knew a RAP existed. So there were significant issues around messaging around a RAP, which is the whole point of a RAP, which is getting the word out there that you're committed to reconciliation. So, when you do that consultation, you find this stuff out, and it helps guide what areas need to be improved or focused on for your RAP for its life journey. So it's a really valuable step, but I wouldn't do it for a reflect RAP because you're still learning. The innovate RAP, I'd be very surface level because you just don't have the capacity yet, I think. I think a stretch RAP is when you get into the real nitty gritty, rich data kind of conversations. And you probably procure somebody in to do that, to be fair. It's a quite intensive process, but it's one that's very rich, very valuable. It also gives you a good bearing on your community, on your local communities, connection to reconciliation and connection to you to reconciliation, which is really important. I think that's probably self-explanatory. The next step is to say you've registered, you've nosied around, you've rung up somebody in another area of a like-size organisation. You've kind of got your RAP working together. If you've got it working together, you've got it. You've done a bit of research and you've got some really rich data sitting there. You need to draft this thing up. So Rec Australia have given you a template and they have given you examples of what you want. But what they don't want to see is you just get the template, stick your name in it, fill in some gaps and send it back without having tailored it. You need to tailor each of those deliverables to suit you. So it might talk about, you develop two-way partnerships with Aboriginal communities, but you might have to go next step and go, we want to develop a two-way partnership with the Nukunuk people and, the city of Port Augusta. I don't know, kind of, it's a complicated one, that one. But I'm just saying, whatever, so you might go and tailor it to your specific, so it might be Ghana or whoever. So you need to tailor it for you because it needs to be meaningful and it needs to be relevant. So look at that template, have a look at some other examples in that and start drafting and making that template applicable to you. You will be also required, and I think, Sean, you mentioned it before, there's like 4 or 5 key action points. It's asking you to add some more action points. So something that's completely not written by Rec Australia, that's completely from you. And you should be able to have those answers really easy if you've done a bit of analysis through your surface level surveys. there'll be something that pops up that you're like, oh, that's not in the wrap, but it's really important for our community that we do that. If you're doing a reflect wrap, it'll be the conversation you have inside your staff room around, oh, you know, like you can bounce these ideas around in staff conversations, and you can certainly say, oh, you know, we've always wanted to do this. I think it would be really great for us to think about, you know, actioning this area. It's really important for us. But it doesn't fit in your wrap. We'll just write it in. You're allowed to just dump something in there. It's really important. It might be under just a deliverable under another action, or it might be a new action altogether. But you will know within your organisation, within your specific council, what are some of the really important things you've been trying to do for a while, but you haven't quite managed to nail it yet. Once you've redrafted your document, I would suggest look at it, and I would suggest also get someone within your organisation that hasn't written it to review it, because you want to understand the tone of the document. And you know, this is going to be a public document. Anybody's going to be able to read this, and you want to make sure that the tone that you intend is the tone that's read. I've seen some wraps that have not toned well, and terminology has not been right. So Rec Australia do their best to kind of bring that awareness to you, but get somebody to have a read of it. If you're a member of Reconciliation SA, we will do that for you and help you with that. We just can't do it if you're not a member, because it would be inundated and we wouldn't have the capacity to do it. You know, it might be another wrap partner that you've been on the phone to, going, hey, can you check this out for me? You know, we had a chat before. I just want to see if we're on the right track. So get a friend to review it for you. Then press the submit button to Rec Australia. It's really easy. It's to upload your document and press submit. Give them 3 weeks at least to have a look at it, because they do go through it. They want it in a Word document and they want it in a table. Can I just be really practical about some things? Don't design it up. Don't make it look pretty yet, because what they're going to do is they're going to they will never delete anything or add anything. What they'll put is comments. They'll do comment. They'll use the track changer comments stuff. So they will highlight whatever they want to talk about, and they will it'll come up in the comments bubbles on the side, and it will write essential or desirable, and then it will tell you what they want. So it might be, they say essential, must use this terminology, and it might be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, or it might be, you know, it is essential that you have that deliverable, reinsert it back into the document, because you might have accidentally deleted it or thought you'd already covered it somewhere else. Sometimes things get a bit, they duplicate a bit, and you go, oh, I've already said that, but I urge you to just keep rereading the the template, because they're trying to get something different out of you. If you've got any questions about that, give me a call or a quick email, and I'll try and get back to you as quick as possible. Once they feed back to you, you'll need to incorporate that feedback. You can't just ignore it. You can go into battle sometimes on things. You know, I've gone into battle sometimes on behalf of organisations, and Rec Australia have gone, oh, okay, we get that, but can you maybe clarify that that's the case? So, for instance, one organisation, they say in their develop a 2-way partnership, and this organisation was saying, oh, that's our leader to leader meetings. We call them leader to leader. But Rec Australia wouldn't approve it because it didn't say 2-way partnerships. So I had to go into bat for this organisation and say, well, actually, leader to leader is the name, the formal name that they give to these 2-way partnerships. Can you let it through? And Rec Australia went, oh yeah, no worries. We just didn't understand that. Maybe can you put a little asterisk somewhere and say that, you know, leader to leader meetings is actually the title of the group of a 2-way partnership, you know, anyway. So, you know, I do go into battle for people sometimes. Let me know if you need to go into battle. You know, they're scared of me, I think. So most of the time I'll win. So that's all good. There will be, and there may, well, actually there may well be, there may not be. It just depends how well you took the feedback on. There may be a few rounds of feedback provided. So expect that they might come back a couple of times, and don't be disheartened if you have it. They're just helping you the best way to get the best out of your wrap. They're looking at tonnage. They're looking at a whole bunch of stuff. They're looking out for your best interests. So that's what they're doing. So don't be disheartened if you get a whole bunch of comments and then another whole bunch of comments and changes. It's okay, and they're doing it in the best interests of the wrap program
the integrity of the program, but also in the best interests of your council as well. They don't want you to put something out that's not achievable, or the tonnage is wrong, or it might, you know, not go down well. So they're certainly trying to look out for you in that space. Once they're kind of happy with it, they'll do a conditional endorsement for you. So in principle endorsement, and that's awesome when you get that. I've got that and I'm going, yay, it's all done, I don't have to do any more. That's when you go to your governance framework, a governance model, and it might be whether it's your council, whether it's your CEO, whatever you decide, and they'll need to sign off on that final copy. Once that's done, you can't change it anymore. No more changing, get it designed up, whether it's artwork, whether it's photos, whatever kind of visuals you want to put into that space. My recommendation is to make it relevant to the wrap. So if you've got certain things in that wrap, you might talk a lot about community events that you do. Chuck in photos of your community events, give it a visual appeal that, that you are actively in this space. And if you don't have photos or you don't want to do that, think about Aboriginal artists in your local area. We've all got awesome artists they're right across, whether they're little known artists or whether they're, really famous artists, it doesn't matter. There's a great way to include some pride in Aboriginal culture in your wrap through that way. So once you've had it all designed up, once it's all been approved from both your organisation and Reconciliation Australia, as I said, don't change it, because they will know and they'll see the slightest word change. Submit it again, the final endorsement. Karen, the boss of Rec Australia, often does a message at the front. They'll write that up for you, they'll send it back. And once it's done, it'll come back to you with your Reconciliation Action Plan has now been approved. And you can organise your own launch, an activity, and then start enacting your communication strategy around this wrap. Share it with every other council in South Australia, brag about it, get it out there, and be excited about what you've achieved, because it's a pretty awesome process to go through. Has anyone got any questions about that process? Now, timeframes, it can take different. So for a reflect wrap, it can take 1 to 2 months to do. So, and if you're taking longer, don't stress. Priorities happen, and often you're flying solo in your council doing this, I would imagine. So reflect wraps 1 to 2 months is probably a reasonable time frame. There's an expectation that obviously the wrap working group to oversee it's not essential for it, but there is an expectation that you have a senior level approval for the wrap and that you've done some internal consultation. So staff room meetings, have some yarns within your own close network in that space. The Innovate wrap, there's some key expectations that you do have a working group to oversee it, that you do undertake internal consultation and engagement, and you have to undertake some Aboriginal stakeholder consultation. So whether that's your Aboriginal staff, and it's limited to that, or whether it's to do, maybe it might be, a reference group that you have, or there might be an Aboriginal health network that you have access to in your local area. There might be, some Aboriginal providers or service providers up in your area. Or you might have a really good relationship with the Aboriginal community and you might hold a barbie and have a yarn. External consultation engagement is recommended. So like I was talking about that surface level one, they haven't gone hard in on that one. So that's like I do surveys for that, for Innovates in that space. So that is recommended, but it's obviously not an essential requirement because they haven't written essential there. And if you're going to go and do stretch, or just bear in mind, it does require much more extensive consultation, and they're a bit more, it's a must conduct. So they're a bit more strict with the stretch wrap. But by the time you get to stretch, you should have really cemented in and solidified a whole bunch of relationships that you've had before through the other wraps. So you cannot get a stretch wrap unless you've done a reflect or an innovate. So don't even think about stretch unless you've done an innovate wrap. Blah. Any questions around that? I hope that was helpful, those timeframes. I just want to be really clear. Rec Australia hold logos and the trademarks, and they will give you those once they approve the wrap. but they are super serious about it. Like so serious, it scares me. But they have to maintain the integrity of a national program in this space. So they will make sure that there are no breaches in copyright laws around this. They keep an eye on everything in this space. It's just to make sure that the RAP process has that integrity and that your RAP is seen of value and importance. All reconciliation action plan frameworks, everything, the IP belongs to Reconciliation Australia. And you know, even with us, we always pay homage to Rec Australia. They took a long time to develop this, and they actually make no money out of it. So they actually don't get any funding for it whatsoever. It's a free service at the moment. There may be some costs coming up into the future. So get them done now before they start implementing a fee structure, which I've heard is coming in soon. So think about it, get it through now. Oh, guess what? I finished. Oh, any questions? That was full and intense. You've got to have some questions.
Shana, you mentioned Reconciliation SA were doing a RAP as well, which it probably shouldn't have, but I must admit it did surprise me. I didn't necessarily consider that. What's your, are you 100% First Nations staff, or do you have a mix?
Yeah, no, we're not. In fact, we are we're kind of like, we're not a non-Aboriginal organisation, but we're not an Aboriginal organisation either.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we're like a halfway between. We don't meet the criteria for incorporation under ORIC or anything like that, or the or any other, you know, legal entity. But we are governed by an Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal board, and we're constituted that way. It's an Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal board. But in terms of our staffing ratio, we have 3 of the current 6 staff. 1, 2, 3, yeah, of the current 6 staff are Aboriginal. So we've got a 50% staffing ratio. That is a goal in our RAP to maintain that. You know, I don't see any issue why we wouldn't maintain that as an organisation that's an exemplar for, you know, reconciliation. We should be, you know, trying to do that sort of stuff. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to get rid of my share screen, but I can't, obviously. Sorry.
I'm just wondering more broadly as well, you know, like I said before, councils like Marion and Adelaide have stretched RAPs and have done some really fantastic things in the community around reconciliation, but still have quite low representation of employees who are First Nations. And you know, even Whyalla, who I referenced before, the percentage of Indigenous people in Whyalla is much greater than the general population. I think it's nearly 5%, but from memory, they had, I am relying on memory, either no First Nations people on staff, or it might have been 1. It was an extremely small number. Do you have any view or theory on why First Nations representation in council might be so low?
Yeah, look, some stuff has been done in Victoria around a similar type of theories around that. A lot's got to do with people not seeing it as a viable career option. You know, in terms of, you know, think about state government, obviously is seen primarily as a viable employment option, but local government isn't. There's also in the Victorian, you know, kind of exploration of this, there was some conversations around perceived cultural safety of people within the organisation. So if there's a low number to start with, in an organisation that maybe hasn't got that cultural competency there, not feeling safe at work. If you're on your own, especially in either small numbers, or whether you're on your own in terms of the only Aboriginal person in 100 staff members, that cultural safety is hard. It's also, you're very vulnerable in that position as well. So that's around recruitment strategies. And if you're a big council, you might have a dedicated, you might, instead of just having one dedicated position, you might have 5 dedicated positions. So you create a bit of safety for people in wanting to come on board. And perhaps the skill sets required within local government haven't necessarily been put out there either. So, acknowledging that there are a whole range of skill sets that can be employed in local government, from horticultural all the way through to administrative, through to finance, through to HR. And, you don't promote yourselves very well either, I have to say, out there around what's available for people with those skill sets. And that's about messaging, and what messaging do you want to put out there? And I think that's a really important exercise for local governments to think about is, when you're connecting with community, what are the messages? So you want to say, yes, we want to build our relationship with Aboriginal community. We want to do that in a number of ways. And one of the, one is around greater community engagement, face-to-face contact, being quite visible in the community. But we also want Aboriginal people inwardly to come and work with us, to come and, but not for their Aboriginality, but for their skill set that they hold and how they can contribute to our organisation and add value to what we do, both as in the function they perform, but also in the quality of character of our organisation. Yeah. But if it's a thing that happens across the board, and it's something, you've highlighted, it seems to be a thing, and Victoria highlighted it as a thing as well, there might be an opportunity for the LGA, as the, member body, to, support initiatives that don't do that messaging. We talk about candidacies for the elections, that's one aspect, but there's also the other aspect of a viable career options, and how we do that, for sure.
Shona, I have a question around with the RAP working group. I'm from City of Burnside as well, and so we have met in a meeting capacity, but one of the Aboriginal representatives said that maybe our next meeting should be a workshop to actually sit down for a full day and discuss how we're going to approach. So we're doing the Reflect RAP. So that's sort of like, why are we doing it, who we're doing it for, discussing and also the how under those pillars. With that workshop, we were wondering if that's something that we should lead as staff, or if we should actually get an external person in to lead the workshop. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's really around how you feel, whether you want to be participants or leaders in the conversations, or facilitators in those conversations. That's really, where you're at. You've already got a really close relationship with a whole bunch of people, and how formal you want to make it as well. I've got resources that I can send you to help if you want to facilitate that. So I do have a bunch of resources around exploring those pillars, exploring sphere of influence, how to do post-it note activities, a whole bunch of stuff like that. So I certainly can send those resources through to you if you want to do that internally. But if you've got the money, which some councils do and some councils don't, but if you've got the money, there is opportunities to engage a facilitator in that space and make sure you give them a very clear scope about what you want them to do though, and that they have a really thorough understanding around reconciliation, because they can go off on a tangent, because there's a difference between, and I have to do it with state government all the time, because they've got an Aboriginal action plan, and then they've got trying to do a state reconciliation action plan, and they get the two confused all the time. They're very different. An Aboriginal strategy or Aboriginal action plan is not a reconciliation action plan. One is around focused solely on outcomes for Aboriginal people, and the other one is focused around reconciliation and relationship building and coming together of First Nations and the wider community. So if you're going to get a facilitator, make sure you brief them really well around, this is reconciliation, this is the space where we want you to go. We do not want you to go into Aboriginal strategy development. This is reconciliation strategy development.
So do Reconciliation South Australia offer assistance with facilitating those sorts of workshops, or is that out of capacity for your team?
No, we do, because, we're poor and we no, we do that. We do that. There may be other providers as well that do that as well. We always encourage you to go local, And you might talk to your Aboriginal stakeholders if they know of anybody. I don't want to do myself out of business, trust me, but I also don't want to go into competition with Aboriginal business either. So, because that's not my gig, I don't want to run anyone out of business. So it might be that there is a recommendation from your Uganda working group, or, you know, so Uganda partners. They might know somebody that does, you know, that does this stuff. There are a bunch of organisations out there that do reconciliation action plan consultancies. So, you know, talk to your local people first, and I suppose, you know, respect the wisdom that they've got in that space, and see if they can think of anyone. If they can't, give us a call and we'll be happy to help. Like, certainly, you know, if you want us as your preferred provider, we're happy to do that. But I would encourage you to think about, you know, go local.
Thanks.
No worries. Yeah, so don't go to Gawler. If you're in Bandside, no, just joking. All good. Is anyone, was that information any useful, or was it stuff you already knew, or?
Hi, Shona, it's Amy and Nat here. We've been off screen because we're
Yeah, why did you do that?
We're in such a large area, so sometimes it's not yeah, for viewing purposes it's not fantastic. But I just wanted to say that the content and the information that you've presented today has been fantastic. We're in the early stages of just finalising our strat plan, and you know the order of priority, how things kind of come from that. So for us, I think it's been fantastic, and I'm really excited about opportunity of actually developing a really meaningful RAP moving forward. So I just wanted to say thanks. The content's been fantastic.
Awesome. No, and are you Morgan Conference Room? So I guess, what council are you? You're from Morgan?
No, we're Mid-Murray, so yes, I'm up in the top end, so a couple of hour drive in the top end of our area for the day, Nat and myself. So and Janie's also from Mid-Murray.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. Fantastic. Well, you've got some great Aboriginal stakeholders in your area that are well familiar with this process, so you've got a head start.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, you know, I have promised to finish early. And I mean, I'm happy to take, I'm trying to be as accessible as possible to everyone. I am a RAP project officer down at the moment, so I'm kind of picking up her role and my role as a CEO at the moment. And I do have an EA who's Emily Soda. If you are looking to reach out or need anything, give Emily a buzz or a bit of an email, emily@reconciliationsa.org.au. She will be the first step until I can get a RAP project officer on board to be a bit more intensive with you guys. If you need, I'm happy to give you all of that information. I don't own any of it. I'm really happy to share anything with you. And if you want to come on to the next one, I know you already had, I'm going to deliver a similar presentation next week, but probably for stretch partners, and a lot of that will focus on challenges, and you might get some heads up next week from those that have done the RAP process before. They're at a stretch level or a high innovate level, and they've got stuck, and they're really, you know, they're over it. They just want to give up. Or, you know, some of them might be really excited and, you know, really enthusiastic about some things. Feel free just to kind of come in and sit in on that one as well. I'm sure there'll be lots of robust discussions and wisdom passed down from each of those councils. I'm going to record it anyway, like I am today. You can just watch it if you don't have time either. So you are on camera. If you've got an issue with that, then I'm going to bad luck. Or talk to the LGA, and we can sort out something about being on for that session. I should have said that up front. But I hope that was helpful. I'll send you whatever I've got. I'll send you links that I've got. I'll send you some resources around how to think about sphere of influence, how to think about you know, RAP working groups, if that's what's helpful. And we're always here to have a chat. Reconciliation SA is a member organisation. If you want to come on board as a member, feel free to do so. We've got varying levels of membership for you based on your, you know, where you're at and affordability. I think
the cheapest membership is like $300 and the most expensive is $1,000. So we're cheap because we're a community-based organisation and a not-for-profit. So we don't want to make anyone poor, but we do would encourage you to do that. Also let you know, we do have a reconciliation breakfast coming up on the 27th of May. So if you're in the city or if you want to trip into the city, we have 2,000 people in one room at one time coming up on the 27th of May. And it's a great opportunity, tables of 10, to get on board and hear about reconciliation. And this year's theme is more than a word, reconciliation takes action. So if you want me, I can also send you a link to Reconciliation Australia's promotion of that logo, well, I suppose that logo and that theme might help you think about and provide some really important information if you need to push anything up the line to the powers that be around breaking the inertia around reconciliation. So cool.
Shona, I'm wondering with next week's session, if you mentioned that it will be recorded, so is there somewhere that we can access that if we're actually not able to attend?
Sure, I'll talk to Belinda and Lee. I'll talk to Lee Bacon maybe and see where they're going to put it. I'm sure they'll put it on the LGA site somewhere. If not, I'll see if I can get a copy and put it on my site and send you the links, because I've got all your emails, obviously, because I sent you the Zoom link. So I'll be able to let you know where it sits, either on our site or the LGA site, but I'll find out. Probably on both our sites, knowing us, because, we like to share.
That would be great, thank you.
Easy. Thank you. If there's any questions, email Emily and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. I appreciate your patience and my long-winded conversations. Thanks, guys.